Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Duncan. I'm a financial therapist and art therapist, and you've come to the softest place to land in personal finance. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. For help with your particular situation, please seek help from a licensed professional in mental health, taxes, and finance. Here we talk about all the things we don't usually say when we talk about money. Let's begin. Today's episode, I'm going to tell you how I became a financial therapist. My path to becoming a financial therapist is sort of the tale of two passions. This passion for money and practical stuff, as well as a passion for very deep healing and mystical, murky, transformative experiences. So I'm a Scorpio sun and a Capricorn rising. And as I've learned a little bit more about astrology, there's something about that combo that really speaks to my love of no small talk, getting into really deep, poignant conversations, as well as taking really practical and aligned action. I love building things. I love getting my hands dirty. An astrologer recently told me that really I could be nothing but a financial therapist given my chart. So for those of you who are more on the woo-woo track, I just wanted to share that with you. Scorpio, Capricorn, if that speaks to you. So from an early age, I always loved sorting things and categorizing things. I was always strong in math and science. I was always the banker in Monopoly. I was really good at mental math. I loved counting up my coins and getting those little paper tubes from the bank so you could put your coins in tubes and take it in and get it deposited. I remember so clearly the day my dad took me to get my very first bank account. I still remember the account number too. I was always really excited to grow up faster. I kind of feel like I was born a 37-year-old woman. And so things like having a bank account, keeping track of my money, finding the best deal on something that I wanted to buy, saving up for something, just felt like play acting adulthood. And it still does, actually. It all still feels like playing pretend. There's sort of some version of Monopoly money. I mean, right? Money is a fiction that we all believe. So let me just set the scene a little bit for you. I have 3 siblings, but they were all teenagers when I was born. In a lot of ways, I grew up as an only child. It was me and my 2 parents, and I created something called Catherine's Cafe. Catherine is my middle name. A couple times a week, I would say, Catherine's Cafe is open, and I would make a little menu. I'd come up with a little dish or some snacks, and then I would make a little receipt. And I would charge my parents for serving them food in their own home that they paid for. I remember tea and coffee were 10 cents a cup, and my mom is from England, so there was like a lot of tea drinking happening, and I collected 10 cents every time. My parents were super supportive of it, and sometimes when their friends would come over, I would open up Catherine's Cafe. I don't think I ever told my friends about this. I kind of knew it was pretty dorky, and it was just something I wanted to do on my own. So growing up, my parents were pretty transparent with me that money was tight, not only in a practical sense, but really like we identify as people who really don't spend a lot. My parents both worked as educators in different capacities. My parents were definitely of the generation where you worked at a place for your 30 years, you got a decent pension, and you didn't really have to save to retire or even be involved in the investment decisions of that retirement account. It was also a time where 2 teachers could afford to pay a mortgage on a suburban home. My parents were also older when I was born. My dad was retired when I was pretty young. My mom continued to work as a teacher. I want to talk about class for a minute. Class is such an interesting thing because there really are tidy buckets. Sometimes we hear lower class, middle class, upper class. I have trouble with those 3 words because they're so pejorative and ranking, when I like to just describe things more accurately. Does someone have housing instability? Do people have savings for retirement or not? Like, these things are a lot more accurate. So like for me growing up, we weren't wealthy, but we did have stable housing. We always had food. Of course, I didn't know the details of my parents' finances, but it was always really emphasized to me that we were really watching our spending And I didn't get a sense that there was a lot extra, although my mom did enjoy the occasional splurge. At the same time, my dad had his PhD in education, and my mom taught at a private school so I could go there. So I was exposed to some pretty wealthy families and very different lifestyles with the people I went to school with. I just always really felt outside of the mainstream, and that I was very, sometimes painfully aware that the home I came from was so different than the homes my friends came from. Some of the money lessons I learned from my folks were helpful. Some were less helpful. Just like everyone, I inherited money scripts. So some of the helpful ones were, watching spending, kind of this understanding that it's easy to spend more than you mean to, trying to buy things that will last, learning to fix things instead of throwing them away. My dad was very serious about no credit card debt. His aversion to debt, though, I think was a double-edged sword for me because I do think debt can also be a tool when used carefully for leverage. But all in all, I think those things have been helpful for me. Hey, I'm a lifelong thrifter. I always will be because that's a lifestyle. But on the other side, my parents were almost against wealth and against pursuing income. And I think they looked at folks who had apparent wealth as greedy. I remember my mom saying, oh, only wealthy people invest. And I think that at the time, that's probably true. In the 80s, regular folks did not have access to easy investing tools like we do today. Both my parents were really impacted by World War II in different ways. So making do, staying humble, supporting community were really important to them. And definitely there was this family motto of, we're poor but proud. However, that just wasn't accurate. We were not actually poor. We always had stable housing and food. But I think my parents' childhoods were so impacted by the war that they really carried this belief that things could end at any minute. They firmly believed that education was the most important thing for security and for personal development. I do really appreciate them for that. So along with this sort of love of the practical nature, as well as interest in business, I went to college actually wanting to study biology. I had a huge love of insects. Maybe this speaks to like the Scorpio in me. I love creepy crawly things. I like the less popular animals. So I thought that's what I was going to do. But as an elective, I took feminism and religion in college. I was ready to kind of ask the big questions that I think a 18-year-old or 19-year-old is really ready to do. And my life was so fundamentally changed by this class, learning what feminism really was, because I don't think I'd ever really learned that, and looking at the role of religion. So two things that I had never really paid attention to, never been emphasized to me. And we had to do a whole personal narrative about my life as a woman and the women in my life growing up. And I decided to major in religion, much to the surprise of my whole family, because I had been headlong on the numbers and science, as well as love of animals side of me this whole time. So anyway, I was a religion major. It was fantastic. It was a very small department. And I think in that time, I also really needed some emotional safety. While I was in college, my dad died. And I think I needed sort of that family in college. And I think I was exploring some of those bigger questions. But the most important thing I think I learned was how to talk about the things we don't usually say. How do we put words to faith? How can we talk with each other about differences in values and morals? The whole degree I can see now has really contributed to my work as a financial therapist, because what is happening in the shadows that is really impacting us day to day, but we're sort of not allowed to talk about in a loving and neutral way. So looking back, I can see why this part of my development was so important to me becoming a financial therapist today. However, I graduate with a liberal arts degree in religion. What you gonna do with that? I ended up working for small businesses throughout my 20s. And because I still had this knack for numbers and spreadsheets and getting things organized, and that was probably my biggest job skill. So really, for my entire 20s, I worked for two small businesses. They were both consulting firms and really took care of all the logistics. I did everything except the consulting work. As one of the businesses really grew, I became known as office mom, which I think is a term of endearment, but we also kind of know what that is. I was sort of running around, putting out fires, taking care of everyone's emotional well-being, as well as all the logistics of the business. I handled everything from bookkeeping to HR to all the operations. It was sort of like a sink or swim learning about business management. And there was a lot I loved about it. I learned a ton. But at about 30, I just hit a ceiling where I just knew I would be stuck in this service role, meeting everyone else's needs for as long as I wanted. It was right about the time when I met my now husband, and he was going to move to another city for work, and he invited me to go with him. It was just the turning point I needed, and I decided to go to graduate school in therapy. Now, I had been on the other side of the couch since I was a teenager. Kind of lifelong struggles with depression and anxiety, and of course the loss of my father when I was quite young. Also, one of my oldest sisters died when I was 25. So I had like a lot of experiences in my early 20s that most people don't have until their, 40s or 50s. So I had become quite accustomed to weekly therapy. So at about age 30, I moved to a new city with this new guy and start looking at grad schools to become a therapist. And in that process, I learned about art therapy because one of the colleges I was looking at offered art therapy as an option. And I had always had also an artistic side. I always took oil painting classes throughout those years of being an administrative professional. And so I tossed my hat in the ring to be an art therapist, and I got accepted. So it kind of at the time felt like a 180, where I went from like this grueling administrative work to just really deep, creative, spooky, as also really grounded and practical, incredible work in the art therapy program in Seattle at Antioch University. But throughout my time there, I felt a bit out of sync from a lot of the professors and other students there because I was interested in the more practical aspects of this therapy work. Like, well, how do we set a rate? And when I was in internship, well, what are they charging my clients and how does that work out? Like, I was really interested in how the business of therapy worked. I just knew I was wired a little bit differently than a lot of my art therapy colleagues. And self-care is a really important thing in therapy because, especially as students, we're just hearing like pretty intense trauma stories all day long. And so, self-care and soothing and recovery are really important to not get burned out in therapy work. So one day in class, we're going around and everyone was sharing what they were going to do for self-care during the break. So you hear the typical, oh, I'm going to get a massage, I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to see a friend for lunch, exercise, all that stuff. And it comes to me and I said, I need to take care of some bills and I need to call customer service for blah, blah, blah. And the professor said, no, we're talking like things that feel good. And I said, well, taking care of some of this financial stuff would feel good. I haven't been able to do it, during the term. And the conversation went on, but that always stuck to me as like, she's wrong. Financial self-care is as important as getting a massage. These things are important to spend a little time with my money. That was an important thing for me. And I was pretty shocked that that was dismissed. So I kind of carried that with me. Also, hearing things like, well, we didn't get into this work for the money. I'm like, well, I have $75,000 in student loan debt. Like, I was anticipating some money. So after grad school, I went into therapy work treating anxiety and depression with my art therapy. At the same time, people still came to me to like update their bookkeeping or draft an HR thing or handle an employment issue. It was like no matter what I did, the money work just kept following me and I still really enjoyed it. But at the time, I really wanted the therapy thing to be my main thing. I did not want to be the office mom anymore. I want to back up a minute and mention my husband because he's a big part of this money journey for me. And if you want to hear more about him, we do a fun conversation in episode 6, Cultural Perspectives on Money with a Ukrainian Twist, because my husband grew up in Ukraine. Meeting Alex was so exciting for me because he wanted to talk about personal finance. I don't know, maybe our second or third date. He was just so open and neutral about it and talking about money in a very matter-of-fact, daily life type of thing has always been part of our relationship. Alex is also pro-wealth, pro-income, and if you remember what I was talking about, my parents' script, that was probably the biggest area of my money healing that was important for me to do, was to accept income and to build wealth and hold on to money instead of, living paycheck to paycheck. instead of avoiding topics like investments. So Alex opened up this whole world of wealth and pursuing income in a way that felt okay. And that was really healing for me. I'd never had that openness in a relationship. So he's been a huge supporter of this financial therapy work and developing the Money Healing Club. So shout out, Alex. So I kind of had these two totally separate compartments. Then during the pandemic, I'd really closed shop to take care of my kids. And two friends sent me an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, describing this new niche of financial therapy. I had no idea that I would be allowed to bring this into the therapy room because I was pretty actively dissuaded from doing that in grad school. It was like I was handed a permission slip to integrate these two parts of myself that I thought were just two totally different compartments, this sort of bridge between the practical and the emotional. So I dove into some additional training about financial therapy and financial social work. And all that confirmed my hunch that this was the right track for me. And then I had the great fortune of meeting Thea. Thea was one of my coaching clients, and she's also an entrepreneur. And partway through our work together, she had the idea of taking this to a bigger audience. She was feeling the benefits of this therapeutic approach towards money and had this idea of creating a membership. So from there, we actually created the Money Healing Club. And we worked on it together for about half a year before she went on to other wonderful endeavors. And now the Money Healing Club is my main focus of work. It was at that time I also started integrating my art therapy training with the financial therapy and financial coaching work. And it's honestly been personally so gratifying because I'm able to do, on one hand, a masterclass on debt, and then a few weeks later, a art therapy session on boundaries and money. It might seem at first that, oh, these things are all over the place, but it actually all sinks into one thing. Oh, it just works, everyone. It's so fun. At the same time, I joke that I'm a spreadsheet therapist. I think exploring like your relationship with money that was influenced by your parents is as important as regulating your nervous system while opening a spreadsheet. It's all important, and it's all something you can do, especially when you're with a guide or a group of people where you feel safe. This is all about improving our relationship with money, from the practical to the emotional, and then bringing in this financial self-care. The thing that my professor didn't understand was really good self-care, I find is essential, and we really bring that into the club. It has also helped me with my own financial self-care. Like, I'm on this process too. I just feel that financial therapy is the missing piece of healing for a lot of people. A lot of folks come to the club having been in therapy, loving therapy, very emotionally intelligent, mature people who feel like a kid about money still. And so often members of the club and my clients express this sort of like, oh, it's this one last thing I need to work on. And so when we work on it, all of this amazing growth sort of ripple effects out of it, from being able to talk about money in intimate relationships, to keeping an eye on impulse spending in a really loving way, to very practical effects of still having money in the bank account at the end of the month and that feeling okay and normal. Like, these things take time, but it's the effect of having a compassionate, trauma-informed approach to any kind of personal growth. We're going to see effects like this. It takes a little longer. It's not a boot camp, but the effect is in being with yourself in the topic of money. Money in itself, it's just a tool. So when we can learn to see it as a tool and not a threat, incredible growth can happen. So now the club has 45 members. About 160 members have gone through the program, so much more than I could have done just by doing one-on-ones for my whole career. I want the Money Healing Club to be the AA of impulse spending. And where I see the club going is to be more member-led, also have more financial therapists and financial coaches to help people at whatever point they're in a cost-effective, really meaningful way. I love bringing in guest experts and offering lots of different points of view because there's no end to learning about money. I also have a side quest that I really want financial therapy to be brought into mental health training programs. Financial therapy is becoming a little bit more known, but still most of the time I'm explaining to people what it is I do. Financial therapy bridges the practical and the emotional sides of money. And sometimes we live in the emotional side for a while before we're ready for the practical. Sometimes we got to do that practical thing first before we're ready for the emotional. And the club really bridges those two things with equal weight. And you may guess that the number one word I hear initially about money is shame. But I want to remind you something you might already know is that shame just vanishes in loving relationships. And community is, I believe, the next frontier of the internet. And I love that I am able to offer such an ethical and grounded and educational and deep community like the Money Healing Club. I'm putting out new lessons all the time. We record all our master classes. It's really becoming quite a library of all the different ways we can see how money impacts our lives, and then how to work with that information to find all of our individual paths with money. There's no one right way to do money, but you can find the one right way for you. So that's my story of how I became a financial therapist, as well as ideas for the future of my work and the Money Healing Club. So with that said, I am going to take a brief pause on this podcast. This will be the last episode of the first season. I'm just going to take a break for a few months, gather more questions, gather more thoughts and insights, and reach out to more wonderful guest experts. And you should see season 2 coming later on in the spring of 2025. So please leave me a voicemail at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. You'll see a bright orange button. Let me know, what topics should we cover in the future? I mean, I didn't even talk about relationships. I didn't even talk about debt. Like, you guys, there is so much more to talk about. I'm here for it. It's my life's work. And I really hope to see you in the club. And remember, your treat for listening to this episode is the coupon code podcast, which gives you 50% off your first month in the club. Check it out, moneyhealingclub.com. So again, this is Rachel Duncan, financial therapist and art therapist, signing off.